far can a brand go to prove its power? In the late 70s, while everyone else was fighting for speed, Kawasaki decided to fight for supremacy. That's how the KZ1300 was born. A 6-cylinder, water-cooled beast, so imposing it looked more like an engine on wheels than a motorcycle. Heavy, brutal, and absolutely one of a kind. Wasn't made for just anyone. In the early 70s, Japan wasn't just competing, it was dominating. The European brands, which for decades had set the pace in motorcycling, were starting to fall behind in the face of Japanese industrial precision. In 1969, Honda launched the CB750 and changed history. 4 cylinders in line, a front disc brake, and reliability that seemed out of this world. It wasn't just fast, it was usable, it was modern. It was the future. 3 years later, Kawasaki answered with the Z1 in 1972. More displacement, more power, more speed. The Z1 didn't just compete with the CB750, it beat it in the numbers. It was aggressive, intimidating, and brutally fast for its time. In just a few years, Japan had redefined what it meant to be a big motorcycle. It was no longer about romantic vibrations or tradition. It was about measurable performance. But by the middle of the decade, something changed. Power started to become normal. 70 horsepower stopped being impressive. Then it was 80, then 90. And the question stopped being, how fast is it? It became, how impactful is it? The American market was growing. The highways were long, fuel was still relatively affordable, and the public wanted machines that weren't just fast. They wanted machines that made a statement. That's when what we could call the war of excess began. Honda, which had already revolutionized the market, decided to move toward luxury and sophistication with the Goldwing in 1975. 4-cylinder boxer engine, liquid cooling, absolute smoothness, and a completely new approach to touring. It was less wild and more refined. It was engineering applied to comfort. In Italy, Benelli responded with something unexpected. The Six, a 6-cylinder bike that was not trying to dominate with numbers but with sound and presence. 6 cylinders in line, hypnotic smoothness, and a look that seemed straight out of an art gallery. It wasn't the most powerful, it was the most extravagant. Being fast was no longer enough. You had to be unforgettable. In that context, Kawasaki was watching. And Kawasaki was not a brand that settled for second place. If Honda was betting on luxury and Benelli on exotic sophistication, Kawasaki wanted something different. They wanted something that would make the Z1 look tame. Something that wouldn't compete on the track, but in visual and technical impact. The goal was no longer the racetrack. It wasn't about winning championships. It was about dominating the conversation. Ego also plays a role in engineering. And in the 1970s, Japanese brands weren't just competing in sales, they were competing in technological pride. Who could build the most complex machine? Who could prove the greatest technical ability? Who could do something that seemed impossible on a production motorcycle? Kawasaki had the answer. No. 4 cylinders. No, 5, 6. An engine that seemed more like it belonged in a car than a motorcycle. Liquid cooling when most were still using air, massive weight, and intimidating presence. It wasn't going to be a lightweight superbike. It wasn't going to be a radical sport bike. It was going to be a symbol, an excess on wheels. And so, in the middle of a decade where everything seemed to be getting faster and bigger, Kawasaki began developing what would become the KZ1300. an ambitious plan, an irrational plan, a plan with 6 cylinders. In 1979, Kawasaki did something nobody expected or needed. They introduced the KZ1300A1, and it wasn't an evolution, it was a break from everything before. The motorcycle world was used to seeing 4 cylinders as the standard of sophistication. 6 cylinders was the territorial luxury cars, not motorcycles. But Kawasaki decided that if they were going to compete in the war of excess, they would go all in. When the curtain rose and the KZ1300 appeared, the impact was immediate. It wasn't just big, it was intimidating. The engine block visually dominated the very center of the bike. There was no way to ignore it. The KZ1300 was equipped with an impressive 1,286 cubic centimeters inline-six cylinder engine, delivering around 120 horsepower at 8,000 RPM with abundant linear torque perfect for the highway. And it came with liquid cooling. 3 dual Mikuni carburetors and shaft drive. Weighing in at nearly 320 kilos, it could reach between 220 and 230 kilometers per hour and accelerate from 0 to 100 in about 3.9 seconds. Numbers that in 1979 were not just impressive, but downright excessive for a production motorcycle. Yes, liquid cooling in 1979, when most bikes still relied on air and a little hope. Liquid cooling was not just a detail. Technical, it was a declaration of modernity. It allowed for more stable temperatures, improved durability, and better withstanding long days at high speed. This brought the KZ1300 closer to the automotive world than to traditional motorcycling. And that's the key point. The KZ1300 was not designed as a lightweight superbike. It was designed as a grand tour with the soul of a muscle bike. The 6-cylinder engine offered something almost unheard of at the time: absolute smoothness. While other bikes would vibrate as the revs climbed, the KZ1300 seemed to float. The power delivery was linear, progressive, and constant. There were no violent jolts. There were no sudden bursts. It was a continuous wave of torque. The wheelbase was longer than many current bikes. With a weight of over 320 kilos, it was one of the heaviest production motorcycles of its time. Moving it while stationary was a physical task. Maneuvering it in the city required planning. It wasn't a bike you could lean into a turn lightly. It was a bike you had to anticipate. The shaft drive reinforced its touring character and ruggedness. It eliminated the need for frequent chain maintenance and improved durability for long trips, but it also added even more weight and complexity. The riding position was also unique. Wide, spacious, comfortable for long distances. The KZ1300 didn't invite you to attack tight corners. It invited you to devour highways. At high speed in a straight line, it was majestic, stable, solid, and had an imposing presence. But in technical corners, its mass made itself known. It wasn't clumsy, but it demanded respect. It demanded skill. It demanded anticipation. It was a bike that commanded authority just by being parked. The size of the engine, the width of the block, the overall length, everything screamed excess. And yet, it was refined. Kawasaki didn't build a chaotic monster, they built a civilized monster. The real impact of the KZ1300 was not that it was the fastest, but that it proved a Japanese brand could build something as complex, as ambitious, and as sophisticated as any European manufacturer. And do it with Japanese reliability. In 1979, the KZ1300 didn't just enter the market, it entered history. Not because it was logical, but because it was impossible to ignore. By the mid-'80s, the market changed. Bikes started becoming lighter, simpler, and more efficient. The KZ1300 was the complete opposite. With its more than 300 kilos, its 6 liquid-cooled cylinders, and its mechanical complexity, it represented pure excess. After its initial carbureted versions, the A1, A2, and A3 models with electronic fuel injection arrived in 1980, along with touring variants like the Voyager, which took advantage of its incredible smoothness for long trips. But the world was already asking for something different. In 1989, its production came to an end. However, the KZ1300 didn't disappear. It became a legend. Today, it's a collector's item, a symbol of technical ambition, and a reminder of a time when brands weren't trying to be rational, they wanted to impress. It wasn't the fastest or the most practical, but it was definitely one of the boldest. And that's what made it timeless. The Kawasaki KZ1300 was not built to be logical. It wasn't made to be light or practical. It was created to show just how far Japanese engineering could go. 6 cylinders, liquid cooling, and a massive size, at a time when none of that was really necessary. It wasn't trying to win races, it wanted to impress, to stake its claim. It didn't want to be the fastest, it wanted to be the most striking. Today, when you see it, you realize it wasn't just a big bike, it was an idea taken to the extreme, exaggerated, ambitious, glorious, and that's why it remains a legend. And if you want to check out other 6-cylinder bikes, click on this video.